welcome back to another EXP podcast. I'm joined once again by Luan and Kem.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
And this week we're going to be discussing the topic of personal artwork. And I have with us this week two guests, Maarten and Samuel. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, Maarten, do you want to start us off?
Yes, hello. My name is Maarten and I am an environment artist at Ubisoft Massive.
And I'm Samuel, lead environment artist, also at Ubisoft Massive.
Okay, so we got you guys on to come and talk about a topic of personal art. And we sort of wanted to go over why you guys think it is so important to do, to be staying up to date and doing artwork for yourself outside of the kind of 9 to 5 that you guys do in your day jobs. So, yeah, I'll start off with Maarten. What's kind of the importance and significance of personal work to you?
Well, for me, it's mostly because I really like doing it. So it's just a lot of fun for me. And other than that, I also try to stay up to date with the latest workflows. And that helps me with my 9 to 5 job as well.
In a sense of staying up to date with your workflows, do you find that you mostly want to evolve your current workflow, or do you want to try and learn other sort of workflows that are used in other studios and so on and so forth?
I think both. Because when you do personal stuff, you can experiment a lot with the things you cannot do at work. So I can just slap some stuff together in a reel and see how it looks and just play around with it.
Is that why you've been doing a lot of experimenting with like Blender and stuff? Is it something a bit more away from the kind of stuff you deal with day to day, and something you wanted to try and see if you could leverage the power of like Eevee and stuff in your own work?
Yeah, exactly. Because Eevee is quite new, and I thought it would be a nice challenge to make something looking cool with just Eevee in Blender. Just also to show the community that you can do a lot of cool stuff in Blender. Because
it does look really good.
Yeah,
it does look really cool. Do you ever never get kind of, I guess it's for both of you, do you never get burnt out when you're doing personal work after 9 to 5, or do you never just want to go home and just watch Netflix or something?
That's me. I go home and I watch Netflix. For me, it's been a bit like love and hate relationship with personal work. I have a few projects that I start, and then I have a pretty hard time finishing them because I feel like I get a lot of stimulants from work. And for me, doing that at work kind of, that's the reason why I'm here. That's the reason why I moved to Sweden. So whenever I get home, I kind of move away from that a little bit, and it makes me extra excited to get back to it on Monday. So, but I've done it in the past as well, and it goes in periods for me when I feel super inspired by something I find on ArtStation or something like that. Then I think you have to listen to that to make sure that whenever you feel like you're, more inspired than what work, gives you back, like on a day-to-day basis, then I think it's a good time to start doing that. But I would definitely, especially if you're in the industry, not really feel pressured to do it if you're not, if your portfolio is sufficient for what you're doing right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, dude, that makes perfect sense, because I sometimes feel that where like I'm at work, I'm like, I need to do personal work. I'm not improving. I'm not progressing. I feel like so many people feel like that. Like if they're not doing personal work, they're not improving.
Yeah, I get that as well. Like for me, it's like I'm not improving on that side of like my skill set. I'm not really improving much on like a technical side, but at work, like I'm improving a lot on like different, like right now it's more management and people oriented, and I'm learning so much from that I don't really feel the need to, go back to that other side when I get back from work. But I've been there before as well, where I do have that feeling that when I get home, you need to jump into Unreal or whatever and get
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like, for me, like the way that I use personal work is every now and then I'll have a project that I'll see through to finish, but I'll just maybe load up Unreal or Substance or whatever, and I'll just like make some quick experiments to see if I can do some cool things, and it becomes like a tiny little learning project for like a weekend or maybe a couple weeks, and then I just let go of it. Like I never like put it on portfolio or anything, because mostly I'm not too bothered about like, I'm not racing to put things on my portfolio. But you guys ever find that you also have these little projects that you use just to like learn a new technique or see if you can improve a part of your work or something like that?
Yeah, I definitely do those little projects, mostly in Blender, just to fiddle around with some stuff and see what I can make and how I can push it.
Do you ever
But
take those into like production? Like when you go back to Ubisoft, for example, is there ever like, hey, I've been working on this workflow is awesome. Can we try it? Or is that like something like any studio, not Ubisoft specifically, but like, is it something you've been able to bring into production in your experience?
Well, not specifically something, but it definitely helped me to get faster at modeling or texturing, because I don't get to do that a lot at work. So when I do it at home, and I need to do it at work, I can do it pretty fast now. But but actual technical things, not really, because we have just a tech art team that's really good and does that stuff.
But you also were one of the big like influencers bringing Blender to the studio, right? Like when you just joined Blender, was this like the small guy in the corner that everybody was just
Everyone,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now I don't know a lot of people who don't use it anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think that's just me, because I got there and Blender 2.8 wasn't out then. So when 2.8 dropped, then everybody flocked to it. So I don't think it was me.
Yeah, we had a similar thing here too, where after 2.8, me and a few of the other guys just like started using it a lot. A few of us even use it on our actual pipeline. But yeah, 2.8 was like this turning point where people started going, oh, I'll pay a little bit more attention to this. So yeah. So do you find in that case, following up from what Cam said, do you want to improve something about your specific skill that you do at work, or do you just want to do things that you don't do at work? Like you're not focusing on bringing something new to the production side, you just want to do something for yourself. Is that how you see your personal work?
I definitely do see it that way, yeah. Because if I wanted to do the same at work, then it would not be fun. Because I want to do my own stuff at home, and that's
Yeah, that I know what you mean. Like, so you just want to kind of relax.
Exactly, because like I said, it's like a hobby for me. So just relax to doodle around with your own stuff.
Do you think it's important to keep your with your kind of personal work to just sort of go with like, do you have any direction to what you do, or do you kind of just go along with anything you're feeling? And do you find that you kind of start a bunch of projects that you don't see to the end? And is it important to try to get something to the end, or does that matter at all? If you end up publishing it or not, does that affect how you kind of approach your work?
Yeah, for me it does. I've been really bad at publishing personal work, and it doesn't feel great either. So I've started a couple projects, and then you invest a lot of time into it, and then at some point you just don't feel like finishing anymore, or like the priority, like in your brain, all of a sudden you're more like, oh, I'm gonna go out biking instead of working on this personal project. And I think there's two ways of looking at it. For once, maybe it's good that you get that sort of gratification from just your professional work, which is great. And then on the other side, there's the downside of it, like you weren't able to pull through and to completely finish the project. So, and going into it, me personally, I always want to finish something, and then not being very great at it, I think it's mostly because of all the stimulants that I get at work. Like I don't feel that sort of desire to work on my own creative stuff, because I feel like I get enough out of work already to do that. So yeah.
Do you ever go on one?
Okay, sure. Do you feel like that's something that has happened more later down in your career, or were you always like this? Because obviously everybody's different, but I know that some people kind of, as they take their career through to the end, they kind of just get less and less, precious about their personal work.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I think it probably also depends on what you're looking to do in the future. If you're about to switch a job, then maybe you might get a bit more into personal work, since some people, like for example me, if I was gonna switch jobs at some point, then I would always want to kind of make sure that I feel super confident going into the next job. And if the skill set required is not 100% in line with what I have right now, then I would need some portfolio pieces to show that it's broader than what I'm doing right now. So in that, I think it makes sense when you're looking for something new to be doing it. And then if you're getting very comfortable in a position, or you're really into what you're doing currently at your job, then you probably wouldn't feel the need as much to do even more of it afterward.
Yeah, of course. And I guess especially like down the line as you become like a lead or a director or that kind of stuff, your professional experience matters way more anyway, right? Not that you don't need to show a good portfolio, of course, but like I think your professional experiences was really going to carry your career choices.
Yeah, and it
going
becomes
forward,
so
right?
vague what you actually do on a project. Like it's hard to show that kind of stuff on our stage.
I just kind of show up for work, man.
No, but it's like I've been watching a lot of the Art Blast and stuff like that, and when you see more like managerial positions posted in Art Blast, it's usually just like a trailer or something where it's super hard to say what you did exactly because you probably didn't do that much exact like practical work. It's more like giving feedback and influencing and enabling your team and stuff like that.
Yeah, but if you would go to a new job, hold up, my English. If you would apply to a new job for a lead position, then you wouldn't only show your portfolio, but I think also more than that.
Yeah, definitely. I think then like almost your resume and your description of what you've been doing at your previous job becomes more relevant.
So like how important then is personal work for someone's portfolio if they're moving to a new job? Then, like if someone's applying at Massive, for example, is that something you're looking for, Samuel, when you're looking through candidates? You're like, all right, this person's got no personal work, but they've got some shit titles. This person's got some awesome personal work. They're devoted. They know what they want to do. Like,
yeah, it's definitely one of those.
And does it depend on the position?
Yeah, exactly.
As well, right?
It's one of those things. Been looking at some portfolios in the time that I've been in this position, and it's one of those things where I look at my own portfolio and I think, well, there's some stuff from the division on there, like that's cool. I feel like there's not much, missing from it. But then when you look through portfolios, you come to realize that it's often a bit unclear what people do specifically in screenshots. And even though like people like Maarten and myself, we were sitting next to each other when we were taking screenshots, and a lot of the stuff in the screenshots is just 100% you figuring out the composition and the visuals. But for example, the assets that are placed in the scene are made by someone completely different. So that's and it's different in every studio. So that's why it's a lot easier for me at least, to judge someone's skill level by seeing a portfolio piece that they uploaded a month ago, which is personal work. Because then it's like, okay, you got these assets from Megascans, because that's usually what people do with vegetation. And then when you use asset packs, usually people mention it. And then they're always really proud of, these are all the things that I made, or all the rest I made myself. So it's definitely a lot easier to judge a portfolio if it's, for example, only personal work versus only professional work, if you're looking for someone for that kind of a role.
So if they mostly have professional work and they probably have like a couple of bits of personal work, maybe they're older, do you find that you're maybe more inclined to just get this person in for an interview to sort of just talk to them and see, just like get to know them and their work a little bit better? Or do you find that you pass on
Definitely
those
not the passing. I feel like if there is a lot of professional work, then the experience is a lot more attractive, and working in a professional environment, and often like a AAA environment, which is a big plus. And then it's exactly like you say, then we just get really excited to talk to the people and to just check how much of a personal match they are, and to see what their role was like, what they worked on in those screenshots. So there's definitely positives on both sides of that spectrum.
in that situation? Because you mentioned like the AAA thing there. More and more indie studios are kind of like sort of at the either the AAA quality, or in terms of quality, not budget, or they have a lot of ex AAA people that have come in and sort of transformed the studio into a bit more of a it's not exactly a AAA studio, but something that's a lot more akin to a Ubisoft or an EA, right? Do you at what point do you define the AAA professional portfolio and the sort of indie portfolio?
Yeah, that's tricky because there's you see a lot of stuff come up online that's like there's a lot of good looking stuff out there that is like AAA looking on a AA budget, and then maybe just the scope of the game is not as big. So I would say as long as the quality of like a very small piece, let's say you just make one room and it looks AAA, then to me that would suffice for like AAA quality, because obviously the budget and the team structure, maybe that is relevant, but like the budget for personal work, like, you know, it's pretty irrelevant. So I would say that as long as the visual quality is up there, then I would not, you know, question the experience in a AAA company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense.
But then again, I do think it's important for
the budget for,
you know, working in a one-person team versus working in a team of 10 different people. But then it would never be a deal breaker for me to not do an interview and to just check how they would handle certain situations.
yeah, absolutely.
So when you go to do a personal project, so we talked a bit about kind of working on when you kind of get that inspiration, but how you're saying that sometimes you get into a project and you know, you can get towards the end and you can find it kind of dragging, and getting over that finish line can be really difficult. Do you think there are ways that you can kind of scope your projects a bit better in the beginning to make something more manageable, that you're right, I can definitely get this one out the door, you know, I can spend 2 weeks on this or whatever, and I know I've got this time to do this and I'll actually get this one done? How do you kind of approach scoping a project in order to make sure that you are able to finish it whilst also kind of balancing the other commitments in your life and full-time work? I think can be a lot for a lot of people to try and to get all those things
I'll leave that
flowing.
one, Maarten.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one, because the scope of personal projects, it's hard to do. But how I mostly see it is I never set a deadline for my personal projects, because then I definitely get stressed out. So what I do, most of my personal projects take 2 to 3 months. And my tip would be, if you're going to start a personal project, to reuse assets you made before then, in case of an environment, because then you can just reuse stuff you made before. And the big one is to have a clear idea of what you want to make, because that really helps in driving your creative flow.
Yeah, that's a really good point on reusing previous work. I think a lot of my older personal work, not so much now because I just don't have the time, but I would focus on creating things like shaders or maybe materials or maybe even some assets that I can reuse later down the line. Even if I don't have a personal project down the line, I kind of just think like, oh, this might come in handy sometime, right? I think that's a really good point of like building a
Yeah,
little
you can
library
also
or
do that with
something.
your technical tests you do in Blender or Unreal, and just save them, and maybe you can use it later for a big project. Yeah,
Precisely. I have this massive Unreal scene where I just is a mess, but it's just me trying
yeah.
different things, right?
And also,
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people mention it, but when I build an environment, I try to break it up in incremental goals, because that way I can always finish a goal, maybe every day or every week, and it always feels good when I finish that goal, and then it gives me more energy to continue. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like do you have some examples of these goals then? Because
Yeah, so there could be a
it
prop.
might be self-explanatory, but people,
Yeah.
You might have a certain way of doing it.
Yeah, for me it's mostly like a prop I finish. So this week I'm gonna finish, I don't know, a house or a cabin or something. And then if I finish it that week, then it feels good because I finished that prop, and then I can go on to the next one. Or it can even be smaller. Just finish a UV map for a prop, or finish a high poly model, or a texture pass, or maybe a lighting pass, and stuff like that. Because that way, because I read about this because I thought it was interesting. When you finish a goal, your brain makes dopamine, and that feels good.
I guess you get that dopamine hit if you unwrap a model. That's your goal. Just every day unwrap something.
Yeah, because unwrapping is not a lot of fun, but when you can make it a goal to finish, then it gets more fun.
I
addiction.
enjoy unwrapping sometimes.
That dopamine
It
hit
can be
of
therapeutic.
Yeah, sometimes.
yeah.
I used to
Absolutely.
love unwrapping. I used to think that was like one of the coolest bits because it's such like
No,
a
man.
like a mindless thing. You just like put on some music and you're just like going at it.
A lot of people see it that way, man. But after a
I
little
would
while,
never
it
want to do it
just,
professionally. No.
That's like the worst part of being like, I
Exactly.
can't make that. Give me some LODs or something. I'll do that instead.
Oof.
I'd probably bounce them.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't mind doing LODs now and then. Depends if it has to be. If I can just click the simply gone button.
I would rather do LODs. I would rather do LODs and unwrap than custom collision. If there's one thing I hate, is custom collision
Really?
in meshes. Man, I can't stand it. Oh man, it can be a little bit tedious, like lining up like little squares to certain areas just to make sure that like it's smooth and
It's the hidden art, dude. It's the hidden
it's a little
art of
tiring.
game development.
Yeah, it is. It's the hidden art.
So yeah, so
If we don't,
So
do
what
more-
happens if you overscope your projects then? I guess there's a question for both of you because like if you've overscoped, do you just trash the project? Do you come back to it a few months later? Do you kind of cut things and try and scope it down to something you can finish?
Should I go first?
Yeah. My answer's terrible, so you go ahead.
It happened to me that I just don't finish a project, which is not nice. But what you maybe can do is look up the assets library or get Quixel in there to just get to some degree of finish, I think. Otherwise, just move on, because everything you learned from that project you can take to the next project. And I think that's the most valuable thing about doing personal work.
yeah, it's important to learn
Yeah.
when to move on, even in your professional work as well. Just like this is
Yeah.
good enough, and not focus on all these
Yeah.
little things that you got to do.
Yeah, because that's a big part of the working in the studio as well, to know when to move on and where to prioritize your time.
I guess we can hear Samuel's supposedly terrible answer on the subject.
Yeah, it's mostly just a terrible answer because I've never been on the other side, you know? Like I've finished some small personal projects, like when I was just trying to get into getting a job and stuff like that. But ever since I've been in my professional career, never been like start to finish, make something cool. And I think the biggest problem, and that's coming back to the scoping thing that we talked about earlier, is that it's just I scope stuff that's too big. And I also didn't set a deadline. But for me personally, what would work better is I would set a deadline and it would have a much smaller scope, because I need a lot more like visual stimulation for me to be able to pull through. So I need to see something that looks pretty good early on so that I can pull through. And I would say that working in, professionally, that's a little bit easier for me to do than on a personal level, because on a personal level, you're the one stopping yourself from making it from start to finish. And on a professional level, the whole studio is moving at a steady pace. So it feels like you're, hitting milestones more regularly. So yeah, not great for me.
I mean, everyone did. Like, I haven't finished a personal project since, man, I've lost track, like February. So, everyone has those patches. It's normal.
And I feel like it's
working.
also just good to know for yourself how badly you want to do personal projects. Because if you don't and you don't need them, then maybe you don't need to burn yourself out by trying to do them. Maybe you just wait for the inspiration to hit, or spend some more time on ArtStation if you feel like you want to be inspired. Because I've been in the same situation with gaming where I'm like, I want to game, because it's easy to kind of lose that romance with gaming once you get into game development. And then I told myself, I want to get back into gaming, but I don't feel like gaming, which is very weird. And then when some blockbuster like The Last of Us 2 comes out or something, then, that's the kind of inspiration that I need to get me a bit more into gaming. And then, small games like Among Us and things like that. So I feel like sometimes if you just wait for the right inspiration to come along, you might get that feeling that you didn't have before.
Do you think that's a little bit to do with, say, the artists versus the production artists? Like some people really like doing art as their career, but they're not the kind of person that just wants to sort of express themselves with art. So they kind of just tend to be like, okay, I do it as a job. I'm not going to focus too much on it as a personal work. But then you obviously got the really passionate artists who might want to really, I don't know, showcase some feelings and some I don't know, environments that really inspire them, right? Do you find that that's the distinction?
I think it's
maybe?
it could be a distinction. I just think that there's also different levels of getting your art fix, so to say, or putting your art influence into real life. Because, for example, for me, I can put my art influence into a lot of different things when I come back from work. It could be the smallest things of like, putting two plants next to each other in a nice composition in the kitchen compared to how they were before. How like my roommate who's a recruiter, not the biggest art mind, and then I could come in and be like, no, it needs to be like this, and then I get inspired, and then I start going around the house fixing things, making sure everything looks aesthetic. So you definitely don't, or me personally, I don't lose that sort of art influence and me like it just taking over and fixing things and thinking of nice compositions, but it just comes out in a little bit of a different
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense.
Do you think you can improve your kind of artistic skills through doing some things that are like away from your computer and the kind of typical stuff you do? Have there been stuff that you've kind of like arranging plants? Is there kind of anything else that
Worst
you
example, and all your patrons are gonna be like, "What's this guy talking about?"
Man, arranging plants and obviously like rearranging your house, it's not very different to rearranging a room in a game. Let's be honest, it's just one 3D.
Man, I enjoy rearranging my house. Man, there's days where I pick up some
It
plants.
is easier in 3D
I'll
though.
move
Let's
my
be honest.
desk
There's no
around.
dusting required or anything. You just move the
IRL
box
set
and
dressing?
But you don't get the physical
What
enjoyment
physical
of like,
enjoyment?
I've done this.
You can't control C it, so
Exactly.
And you have to actually do it. Yeah, but I feel like sometimes it's also a bit more difficult in real life because I'm looking at a room, for example, in my bedroom that I'm in right now, and I can look at the room and be like, it's functional, it works, and it looks okay. But then maybe I want to make it look sick. And then I start asking myself, what can I do in this room that makes it like up to the standard that I do on a day-to-day basis at Massive, What would I do if I wanted to make this, use my art mind to sort of enable this room in a better way? Because it's stuff that you don't really think about on a day-to-day basis. So I think you can definitely challenge yourself doing stuff like that, or helping someone decorate their house, something like that,
And it can improve your well-being too, right? Like being in an aesthetically pleasing place, I
100%.
suppose.
Like having a clean desk
Yeah.
or an organized mess on your desk is so important for me. Like I can't work if the desk is messy. I just feel like it's not ideal.
yeah, I feel the same. But you can also pick up other hobbies that still has something to do with your work, like photography. You learn about composition or videography.
Yeah, it's so good. I remember when we were this was a couple of years ago, where I think we hired an intern, not based on the actual portfolio, but on a blog where he had the photography and stuff like that, where he had really cool compositions, which is really like it's a good feature to have as an intern to show that you really master composition. And it was a really skilled person in the end, so that's really cool.
Yeah, because you can still get away from the computer and still practice composition and all that kind of stuff.
And I feel like in the end, it's the biggest skill that you can have is knowing what looks good, which it helps a lot doing photography. But I actually wanted to come back to the clean desk thing because actually today or yesterday, where I was at the office and I was thinking my desk looks a little bit like my screens were a little bit tilted, and I have someone in my team who is very much into like clean desk, like cable management. I asked him like, I want to clean out my desk. I feel like that's gonna help me. And so we went down to IT and we went into IT and they're like, you got zip ties? And we're like, yeah, we have zip ties, but we also have these cool Velcro things. And then we're like, ooh, Velcro, that's even cooler. And we got like a little, what do you call it? Like something to measure how straight something is. Yeah, a level. We got one of those and then we leveled the screens perfectly and we did the whole ergonomic measurement thing to see how far you're sitting from your screen. And now I come into work in the morning and I'm like, I'm now enabled by the perfect desk setup. I feel even
Most perfect
Yeah.
desk, so productive. Nah, but it makes total sense, dude. Like, you kind of want to be in an environment that makes you feel creative, right? And maybe for some people that's a super messy place. That's fine. But I think for a lot of people, sort of a nice, clean, tidy, and healthy like living space can really help, especially with the ones that are finding themselves a little bit less creative. One thing I found for working from home for so long now is that if I don't tidy my desk every a couple weeks or so, I start to feel just a little bit more tired from work and a little bit more unwanting to do a lot of things, and my mind is just not functioning as well. So there's a hot tip for everyone: just tidy your desks.
Yeah, definitely, especially when working from home now. I bet a lot of people have upgraded their setups, and early on there was a lot of people showing off like you got the dual screen setup now, or like the triple screen setup, and posting pictures on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, and they have the cool lights behind the screens.
Yes, I need to get some of those.
I need to
Yeah.
get some of those as well. Any
Yeah.
recommendations?
Philips Hue,
Oh,
man.
yeah,
I've
dude.
got some Philips Hue. Just put some
Ooh.
strips behind
Oh, it's
it.
gonna look
Sync it to your
sick.
computer. Put on some videos.
Does it do like the ambilight
Right.
stuff where it like matches stuff that's on your screen?
It does. It does. It does it for both screen and audio. So you can actually even just
Oh
play
my
some
Dude, that's
music and it
sick.
just like beats to the
Let's
audio.
add
It's
that in
really
the
good.
description, and Philips, if you're listening, we can have a sponsor.
Do you think that that helps at home as well? If you come home to kind of a desk, you come in, your desk's kind of cleaner, or the space is there. Do you feel more inspired to come and work on something? Is that something that affects you at all?
Well, I'm still working from home, so I don't leave the desk then. But it definitely helps to have a clean desk, because then it's the same for a clean desktop. If you open up your computer and it's only a background, that really helps a lot by starting up your day. Yeah.
Here's a pro tip for everybody: right click and tick the show desktop icons, and you'll always
That's
have a
cheating.
clean desktop.
But do you feel like, Maarten, that you do like your relationship with personal work now that you've been working from home for a while, has that changed at all? Sitting behind the same desk for work and personal work?
In the beginning it did, but now it's like when I close the thing we use to do remote work, then I also close work for me in my mind. But I really need to get away from my desk for at least 2 hours before I can get back to it with personal work.
Yeah, I'm like that. Although I'm more like an hour. I don't know if you do this, Martin, but I normally use like dinner as the transition period. So like I'll do
me too.
work,
Yeah.
and then I'll stop, and then I'll have dinner or whatever, and then when I sit back down at my desk, it's like, okay, it's time to do the next thing.
Yeah, dinner and
Otherwise,
Netflix
fuck,
series.
man, I'd go crazy if it's just like, all right, work's finished, let's do the next thing. straight
No,
away.
I cannot do that. No.
That would be so insane.
Yeah.
Like that's the next level.
And if you had some Philips Hue as well, you could change the lighting conditions.
I'm gonna look on Amazon. I'm gonna buy them right now.
I used to feel more inspired when I was doing the commute, because like when I was cycling home from work, that time, it would give me like time where I'm away from a screen, not looking at anything, and I could think about what I'd want to do when I get home. I could start thinking about my project because I'm out of the space from work, and when you're
I think people underestimate how important a commute can be. I think in a lot of situations, I used to commute to work from Manchester, but now I live like literally a minute and a half from work. And I think that period of like 20 to 30 minutes on the train really helped me refresh myself in a sense. Like it kind of bookended work really well in a way that I sort of felt like I was going back home and I was listening to a podcast or whatever to just transition my mind off of work and onto something else, even if that is personal work, right? I think people underestimate how healthy a commute can be, as long as it's not too long, right? Like a 2-hour commute.
I love that as well. Biking home from work, biking to work. I feel like when you bike to work, it kind of allows you not to, to really be in your home space when you're home. And then when you're going to work, it gives you time to like transition and be like, okay, this is what my day kind of looks like. We're looking all good with this. We're going to do this, boom, boom. You get into work, and when you sit at your desk, you're like, all right, we're at work now. And then you get cracking. And then when you go back home, it's like the reverse thing where you can start like, I listen to music on a bike, and then sometimes there's a certain song where I'm like, this will be cool to make some sick art on or something. Sometimes it works that way. Inspiration for me. Or other times you're like, okay, what are we eating? Are we doing like badminton or something tonight? And you can kind of transition into being home. And by the time you get home, you kind of let go of your previous state, which I feel like you would lose if you live like you say, like a minute. Do you feel that? Do you feel that in your mindset when you only have that 1 minute commute?
I think the first few months, probably it was kind of just like novel to just wake up at 8:30 and be at work by like 8:45. Like you have a shower and then you're ready to go. But honestly, 100%, I absolutely agree with you. I think now more than ever, I would even like, especially with the whole working from home thing, I would even just explore ideas of maybe getting an apartment in Manchester again and just like bike to work, or just in a next town over, or whatever. I think, like you said, it's almost like rejigs your brain into a different mode, right? Like you're ready to do something else. Yeah, I very much agree with that.
I was joking with someone about walking around the block in the morning as like
I try and do that.
Nah, dude, that's
Did
good.
you try to do that?
Now, what? How did it go, Kim?
Wait, what?
How did it go? You said you do that, right?
No, well, sometimes, like if I wake up really early, I'm like, I've got time to kill. I'll go for a walk, and then before I know it, I'm like, oh, I'm starting at 9:00. Like, fucking waste of time. So sometimes I just skip the walk. I'm like, I'll just start work and finish early, and then do the walk after work. Maybe it depends. Every day is different.
Whilst working from home, me and one of my coworkers who lives in the same apartment building, when we weren't in full lockdown, right at 6 p.m. every day, we would just be like, all right, let's go. We'd go for a walk around the park, chat a little bit, just refresh our minds, and come back home. And that would be the transition I was usually looking for. But since we've gone back into full lockdown and things have been looking worse for England, I've felt like particularly uncreative, I think. So I think those things are healthy and important, right?
You need to kind of trick your mind into thinking it's going into work and then leaving work. You could install like a card reader on your door. Swipe into the office. That's how it's leaving.
Oh no, that's getting into why am I doing overtime?
Well, clock in. There we go. 9:00. Let's go.
You can like be late to working from home. You're like, oh damn it.
Like crap.
Excuse your girlfriend for being late. Yeah, sorry.
It won't happen again, I promise.
I forgot what Tim asked, to be honest. He's going to ask now.
Got something different now. So, when you're kind of doing work for yourself, do you ever take a break if you feel something's too much? And if you have taken a break, do you find yourself coming back to a project later feeling more inspired, or do you end up just never returning to it?
Yeah, I definitely take a break from stuff. And then it's the same as when you do professional work. Then you go home, and then you come back next day, and then you feel like, now I can do this again. And I think it's the same for personal work. And sometimes it can be like a month not looking at it, and then coming back like, now I feel inspired again to do it.
Yeah, for me it also just helps a lot to try to ask feedback from friends and things like that, like people that are good with composition, like a concept art or something. You get them to do a paint over or do like a call with them, or people that are good like character artists or something. They can help you get inspired by some other mediums, some stuff like that. To me, that really helped, like picking up the inspiration again, trying to get some feedback from your peers.
And because if you frame it like that, then the personal work almost sounds like a marathon. But I think it's okay to take breaks and work on it when you want to work on it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like how you were saying earlier, where it's not really just it's just a thing that you work on in the background. It's not like you're coming home and going, I have to do this right now. Not setting yourself deadlines precisely.
When you're saying, I was saying about showing it to other people to get kind of inspired, have you found that you show it to someone and they get excited about the idea and they're throwing ideas at you, and that can kind of help reinvigorate your excitement for something, or even help you to actually get it finished because that person's then asking about it, or how's your project going, or this kind of stuff? Can that, having someone else involved somewhat in that process of doing your kind of personal work, is that something that's helped to kind of inspire you?
Yeah, definitely for me. Like, especially if you get people involved that you look up to on like a professional and maybe even a personal level, if you get them involved, you almost kind of like feel like you're letting them down if you don't. And on the other side, if they get really excited about a project, then maybe you jump into a call with like 4 or 5 friends and you're sharing your screen and everybody's throwing back and forth ideas, then that could really help like add inspiration uh, to what you're doing. So I would say that's a big yes, and I think it works the same professionally as well.
Yeah. Plus, and also for the people that don't have these kind of colleagues like we do, there are these discords like the Experience one and Dynasty. People throw in art there all the time to get inspired and for feedback. So
Or like stuff that's as simple as or as simple of an accessibility wise as an art station challenge, because then the whole world is basically watching, and if you drop out, and people will notice, and then you kind of have that pressure of finishing something and being like having that submission done, looking at other people's progress and getting inspired by them. I feel like that would be a really good way to keep the inspiration at a high level.
Yeah, I've noticed art station challenges are really, really popular with a lot of people in the industry, especially some you might think, how do these guys have time with how much they do? But it seems like it's a good way to get kind of quite a lot of inspiration, because you have a chance to kind of watch the concepts be made or look at something there and be like, oh, that's really cool. And a
Oh
bit
yeah,
more
because
time
they
to
have
kind
the
of think
concept
about it.
challenge then, and then you can make it based off the concept. That's how it works, right? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, especially if you base it off of concept, right? If you're going off of something that's just from your own head, I think it's I think a lot more of the experience types tend to do something that's not from concept, but it's a lot harder to keep that motivation going, that
Yeah, and it's
inspiration.
easier to feedback yourself as well if you have a concept that you're trying to work from. And I don't think it needs to be a one-to-one where you do an overlay and you're just like, okay, this needs to be a little bit smaller, this needs to be a little bit deeper and stuff like that. I think the thing with concepts is like nailing the mood of something. And I feel like if you have a perfect example of what the mood should look like, it can be super inspiring rather than having something in your head and you can't really figure out if what's in your head even is going to look good. So especially if you don't have a lot of experience with personal projects, having that reference of a concept art could be really cool. And then the fact that it's used in the ArtStation challenge means that it has never been made before, or people are making it alongside you, which is also pretty fun.
So I know Martin has done really well in a couple of ArtStation challenges. Were you working full time during either of these, either of the ones that you placed in top 3 on?
the first one I did was when I was a student, and I actually landed my job with that challenge. And the second one was the Wild West challenge, and that was when I was working at Ubisoft.
So how did you find the difference between? So presumably during the first one you actually had a lot more time to work on it, but by the second one you had more experience. What was the kind of difference between those? How did it? How did it feel kind of doing each one, and what were the differences between them for yourself?
I definitely feel like organization-wise, if that makes sense. Like the first one was like really slapped together with all kinds of stuff, like you do as a student. And then the second one, I was more experienced, and folder structure was better, and naming conventions and all that stuff. That makes it easier for yourself to make the project bigger if it's all streamlined.
Always pay attention to folder structure and naming conventions.
Yeah.
Always do. I think it's very important to keep your I guess your not your motivation, but I
Sanity.
guess your just keep yourself
Yeah.
working. Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
that definitely helped with also cutting down time while I was working full time next to it, because you work more efficient that way.
Do you try to keep a consistent sort of structure between all your different projects? Because you were mentioning about going back and kind of like taking things from older projects to help you with your next project or whatever. Do you try to keep that consistent structure so that it's easy to go back and go, right, here's where this is, and I can just copy paste to my new one?
Yeah, I have my own material set up, like my pack textures. It's a preset in Substance, and I use that one all the time. So whenever I use my shader I made in Unreal, then it all works together. And it's all in the same scale as well.
Has that helped you with your other work as well to kind of be much faster with your personal work? Do you feel like you're kind of achieving the goals with those projects? You're getting to the point where you want to be in those much faster because you've got that kind of groundwork laid out?
Yeah, that definitely helps. And it really helps if you already have something you can just put in there and work from there. And for me, what I really like to do is, I don't like doing blockouts. I just like to make pretty stuff. So usually I make a few props because I like building props. And then when they look good, I put them in a reel, and then I try to block something out with that. And it helps if you already have your own library of stuff you can just put together. If that makes sense.
Are there any examples of things that you've reused that's on your ArtStation so that someone could go look and see? Are there any projects that you've got something that's like, I used this from this one?
Yeah, I think if you look at my Last of Us fan art, the first one I made with the guitar, and then you see the guitar in like every other project, because then it's in my attic scene as well, and then it's in my campfire scene, and then it's again in the Last of Us scene, and then another attic scene. It's the same guitar.
At what point do you have enough assets to make a game?
That depends on what game. Yeah,
It's coming.
yeah, but mostly generic props. Like I have these cardboard boxes, and I mean, ever since I made them, I use them in every project because they're so useful. But you also need to look out that not every project doesn't look the same, because that's the trap you can fall into then.
Do you ever feel like making something bigger? Like thinking about making like a, like a cutscene that goes into like a little gameplay section or something like that? Or have you never ever thought about that?
Yeah, I thought about that, but then the scope is so big for something like that. And then you also need to do a lot of other stuff than environment art. And then I already get demotivated.
Just thinking about
Yeah.
all that work.
Something big.
Too much.
Yeah, I guess if once it starts to feel like a job again, it's sucks a bit of the fun out of it, really.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Like if you don't feel like doing it, I just wouldn't do it. Unless if you're doing like the thing where you're just like, I'm gonna try for 5 minutes and then maybe I get into it. But I feel like if it ever starts feeling like you're forcing yourself to do something that you don't really, need for any professional reason, and you're doing that outside of work, like working on portfolio pieces, then I would say it's gonna make you lose that connection with what you really love doing professionally, and then kind of, it's gonna make your passion for the industry burn out rather than to ignite it again. So I would take it as it comes.
Here's a question for you guys.
Oh,
Sorry,
I wanted
go
to
on.
say
Go on.
there's always parts of a personal project that are not fun. But I think what's important that in the end you have fulfillment of it. And when you feel that, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think getting that feeling of I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish and I'm happy with it. Maybe you're not. It's not perfect or whatever, but just it's quite important, right? To achieve, when you achieve that sort of, that's when you know that you're done with the work
and
as
then
well.
you get motivated to do the next one.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you guys, in terms of your personal work specifically, not your professional work, do you find that there's a time of the day that you're more creative? Annoyingly, I find myself that I'm getting more and more creative like at midnight, and I really don't want to be creative at midnight. I want to go to bed at midnight.
I'm
And
like that.
it's starting to annoy me. I was wondering how you guys feel about it.
I get more creative in the morning, but then I need to work for actual work. So that sucks. But yeah, I think I force myself to be creative in the evening because that's the only time I can do it, or in the weekends.
For me, it's more whenever there's not too many people around me doing stuff. So in the mornings or in the evenings, that works for me well. If I wake up really early, like at 6 or something on a Saturday, then I can feel really inspired. And it's the same if I work late on a weekday or something on a personal project. But I would say early morning, more inspiring because you also feel like you already won the day because you're awake before anyone else. So for me, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, that satisfaction of being awake before everybody else. Haven't had that in a long time, to be honest.
I also work the other way around, where you feel proud of being awake while everybody else is already sleeping.
I don't know if anyone feels proud about that. I don't feel
midnight.
proud about that.
It's the shame more than pride.
The shame keeps you going. But yeah, because I'm asking mostly because I've thought about this a lot in the past few weeks, maybe even months, specifically working from home. I find that I'll get really late in the day and I'll suddenly just have a spark of energy to do some work where I'm like, oh, I could finish that trim right now. And then you sit down and you get it finished and it's like 3 a.m. and you're like, why did I just do this? And why was I creative now? Why couldn't have this happen before? I mean, as artists, you never know when you're going to get creative, really. Obviously, there's certain things you can do to help that, but you just never know when that spark might come,
I
right?
think that's cool, though, if you can really lose yourself
Well-
in something. And then it's like, oh my God, look at the time. I think
Yeah.
for me, like that feels really good.
Yeah,
Also, I
you're
get
right.
mostly creative when I see stuff. So when I see a cool picture or a cool artwork on ArtStation, then I get creative. So by saving that one, I put it in your PureRef, and you can look at it that night. Then you can ignite the creativity again and work on it.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll find loads of inspiration
What I
tonight
do-
because the Demon Souls art dump just started.
Yeah, so something like that.
It is true. Yeah, that's
I'm actually
happening.
right now.
So what I do is I'll pick a scene. I'll pick something on ArtStation that I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to make something like that, or that inspires me, and I put it on my folder, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start that, and I white box it a little bit, or I set up a shader. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I did as much as I wanted.
Yeah, inspiration's gone. We made it.
Yeah. Oh no, I have work to do. This wasn't easy.
But do you feel like that's
Yeah.
then your art fix, or does it feel different?
I think it depends on what I accomplished. I think if I see maybe some foliage or like let's say I see a castle, I'm like, oh, I'd really like to do like some bricks and stuff and see if I can pull that off. And I'll start it. And I think I kind of lose that inspiration for a little bit whilst I'm doing most of the setup and white boxing. But I think as soon as I get past that, then I can actually bring that inspiration back in. So one thing I like to do is I mostly do setup when I'm doing menial things, like maybe I have a podcast to listen to that I really want to catch up with, or some TV shows I want to catch up with. So I'll do a little bit of that white boxing during, because then it's kind of just almost like it becomes free, right? And then after that's done, I'm like, oh, the setup's done. I can actually get on with the work. Otherwise, it's a hell of a block to get
just
through.
to turn off your brain and start.
Yeah, that's pretty smart. I feel like it's also, maybe it has more to do with AAA, but I would also really think it's very skillful and a good portfolio piece to just get one of the free asset packs and just make a cool scene with it. Maybe you combine an overgrowth asset pack with one of the warehouse asset packs and making, something that's like semi overgrown or something like that with that. You got the Unreal Terrain, you can do a lot of cool stuff. And that's a job for some people. Like that's a lot of what Maarten and me did professionally for the last few years. So I would say if you feel like that first step is not super interesting to you, then maybe just skip it like you would in a professional environment. But then again, maybe you won't feel as rewarded in the end if you know that you would normally do it yourself. But maybe it's a change of mindset that could be useful.
Yeah, and I guess what you're trying to achieve with your project can really help as well, right? Like if my next project is, I really want to get better with composition or lighting, I would probably try to get some Megascans assets or some asset packs and just trying to accomplish something with that rather than make everything from scratch. And maybe I'll get to the end of it, I'm like, oh, I really like this. Maybe I can swap the assets with my own assets at this point and make them right and just replace them because I'm happy with the final, almost like a visual target, right? Yeah, I think that could work as well.
Okay, I think we're about that time of the show where we hop over and grab some questions from our Patreon supporters. So hopefully you guys are ready.
I'm
What
ready.
have we got?
So
boss
first
fight.
question from Cairo. He's asked about using different tools for different scenes. So for example, he's given is Maarten using UE4, Blender, and Unity for rendering out different kind of scenes that you've done. How do you choose which software you use, and what kind of influences it? And do you have a favorite? And is that something? I guess is that something that you're playing around with more, or are you? How come you've used such a diverse kind of variety of things to render your work in?
Yeah, I started out with Unity because when at the time, I know a lot of people said, well, you can make something like that in Unity, and that was kind of my goal because then you also get people talking about your artwork. So that's mostly that's mostly why I choose those tools. Same for Eevee, because at the time when I made my first Eevee scene, there were not a lot of people that made a scene in Eevee, and then when you make one that stands out, then people talk about it, and a lot of people see it. And now with Unreal, that's also because I want to sell on the marketplace, so I dived into Unreal. And at this moment, I think Unreal is my favorite tool.
So there's always some sort of goal in mind, right? It's not like you're just picking
exactly.
at random.
Plus, I also want to learn the tool. And then, as a bonus, it's a niche thing most of the time. Not Unreal this time, but Unity and Eevee at the time were for the stuff I made. No, you
Never
haven't?
heard of it.
Has going into making assets with things with the intention to sell, do you think that that can be a good way to kind of keep you motivated on doing something outside of work, because you've got like an end goal there that's gonna have something more tangible as a reward than just making a cool piece of work to put up online?
Yeah, that definitely helps. But on the flip side of that is that I cannot use any Megascans or any other assets. So I have to make everything.
Make it all from scratch.
Yeah, because you need to own the license of the stuff you make to sell it. So you need to make everything from scratch, and that cannot. Sometimes that's hard to get through, but in the end, it's more rewarding, I think.
Yeah, it creates a lot of extra work, a lot of extra time investment.
Yeah, it does. But if you can, it's pretty cool to see then if your assets are used in indie games and stuff like that, and that's a big reward as well.
Yeah, that's got to be a good feeling, kind of seeing your the payoff of that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I hope I see it one day.
In time.
Yeah.
Be that guitar everywhere. It's not just in your project.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, there might even be a situation where you don't even recognize that, right? Like they might pick it up and like even change the asset in a way they
do that all the time.
Is that what I think it is?
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to do, because otherwise everything is going to look the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same philosophy with Megascans, right? You can pick up a rock and put it in your scene, but it's about doing something more with it.
And that comes back to why composition is so important. Because Megascans doesn't sell your camera; you need to do that yourself.
Yeah, they with the mixer recently, they were showing off some some ways that you could like retexture Megascan's assets to like create like stylized textures and stuff in Mixer for on the asset. So I guess that could be an interesting approach to a project to kind of, instead of worrying about trying to make everything yourself, just taking stuff like the Megascan's assets and then retexturing them so that you have some sort of ownership over it, but it's you don't necessarily have to go from zero.
Yeah, but I think if you still want to sell it, you can still not do that. But
Yeah,
it can help by building a portfolio and having it more stand out than only Megascan stuff.
And I have another question here. So Dom's asked about how often do you guys do personal work, and when you start a project, do you always have a goal in mind for that project? So I guess we can start with some of the stuff.
So the times that I've started personal projects, which like I said, hasn't been recently, but what I like to do is to have a clear goal in mind of what I want to achieve. And for me, with the last project that I did was a lot more about interesting shader work and being pretty optimized with that. So I definitely think about the main goal that I have in mind. I think if I would change anything, I would give myself a hard deadline, because for me that really works. And it kind of motivates me to know that, for example, okay, in 6 weeks I'm going to be done with it and I'm going to have the result to show for it, right? And I'm going to, because I really like to be completely taken over by something, so that when I get home from work, I'm like, all right, we're going to be doing this now for a couple hours. And maybe I wake up early in the morning and I do some more of it and stuff like that. I like, waking up in the morning and thinking like, I'm going to wake up because I'm going to go do this cool stuff, So for me, that's really fun. And it helps me more if I have a hard deadline to be that motivated. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
What was the question again? How often I do pick up a new personal work? Or
How often do you do your personal work, and do you always have a goal in mind when you're going to start a project?
Yeah, I definitely have a goal in mind when I start one, and it usually, the goal always comes when the inspiration hits, if I have to say so. So, for instance, my Last of Us scene, I was super inspired by the game, and then I had this goal of, I'm going to make this, and then I made it in like 2 months. And in terms of how often I work on it, if I'm really motivated and inspired to work on personal, I work on it every night and try to do it every weekend. But there's also periods where I don't work on it for a month. But it's really when you're inspired only that you really want to work on it.
Yeah, I've certainly done that with my projects, where I start something and I get on with the fine first month or so, and then I kind of just stop for like months on end. I don't pick it up again until like 8 months later, sometimes even a year later. Might not even finish it, right? But like it's kind of always in a shelf over there, and I just like, oh, I'll work on this today, or I'll pick it up later.
Yeah, I guess it's not so important either when it's personal work and you're spending your day working professionally, because you're still you're spending those kind of 7-8 hours a day working on something that that you'll have to show at some point anyway. So it's not like if you're building your first portfolio to try and get the first job, where it's what you do there or nothing. So you don't necessarily your next job isn't necessarily so reliant on that work that you do in your free time. So if it takes you a year to make a piece, you've still got a year's worth of experience / work that from that title when it's published that you can show.
Yeah, and I suppose it goes back to what Maarten was saying earlier, right? Where it's like, just don't be pressured. Just do your personal work when you do it.
That's
that's
also why I don't take freelance work next to the work I do. Because if I do that, then I know I'm going to burn out. Because then people are reliant on you, and you need to meet certain deadlines and stuff.
Okay, let's have a look, see if we've got another one here. So I'm going to slightly rephrase this question. But when when you're going for doing creating a personal project, do you ever approach a project with the intention of just improving one specific skill, or do you kind of try to pick projects that you are really inspiring, something you really want to work on, and then sort of try to integrate that into whatever you want to learn? So I guess what's kind of what's the process? Are you looking for something? Oh, I'm really inspired by this. I want to make this, and then I'll try to find ways that I can do cool stuff into that. Or you're like, oh, this is a really cool thing I've heard about or read online. Let me try and find a project that I can use this in.
I think it's the first one you just said, that when I see something that inspires me, I try to incorporate it in a personal project I want to do. Because if I want to learn a specific thing, and only that thing, I would do a technical test in Unreal or something like that. For example, I saw these Assassin's Creed trees coming along on Twitter, and I was like, that's fucking cool. Sorry for swearing.
That's fine.
No, please.
Okay.
Fuck away.
But those are some really cool trees, and I wasn't planning on making trees for my scene, but now I already made some trees because it's interesting and it inspired me. Now I learned how to make a proper tree in Blender. So,
what about you, Samuel?
For me, I get really inspired by like purely visuals and things like that. So, and like I said earlier as well, songs. Sometimes when I'm listening to a song, I'm trying to imagine how cool it would be to showcase art on that song or create some sort of an experience with that. So for me, I have this picture in my mind of like really cool artwork. It could be even just like a single asset or something, and then showcasing it with like a really cool song and like a YouTube video or some cool ArtStation GIFs. So for me, I never really have like a specific goal in mind of like I want to improve my composition or I want to improve like the fidelity of the assets. I have more like an overall like I'm super inspired by this image and that I have in my head, which is like cool art with a nice song. I'm going to present it into this way. I want to do some cool panning shots. And that doesn't mean that the actual visuals is something that I have in mind. It's just like the idea. And then maybe I start looking for some concept art that fits with the mood that I have in my head. And then I'm just looking forward to like, presenting it in a nice way. And I think that's the stuff that interests me the most, is taking stuff and making it and presenting it in a nice way. And that's why level art fits very well with me, which is a lot about composition and colors and presentation, and not as much about fidelity of single assets, or doing any sort of like sculpting, things like that. That's I'm more of like I like to work towards like a final product pretty fast, and I know not everyone is that way, but for me that's what I like. I really like presenting things and showing things off.
It's interesting you say that. Like, as the years go by and as I work more and more, I'm just kind of thinking like, I kind of just want to focus on telling a cool story or showing like a really nice final image. So maybe that's something that happens like more to people as they, go through their career, or maybe they just love making assets and they do it. But I find it for myself anyway, I've gone from really wanting to make assets, really wanting to make materials, having done all that, I'm like, I kind of just want to do a little bit of level art, to be honest. Just like tell a story, show cool lighting and final image, right? Yeah.
And maybe it also just sort of comes with, the excitement of learning what it's like to make these digital environments. And in the beginning, it can be super cool to like model a knife or something. And you're like, I want to do this my whole life and I want to make more detailed knives and stuff like that, And then as you master skills throughout the whole process, then you sort of realize what you can do with those. And then, like you say, you get maybe more interested into telling a story and affecting people in that way. So I think it makes sense. But on the other side, I can really understand why modeling and stuff like that. I look at some of Maarten's pieces and then we sit together behind his computer and I ask him, "Did you model that yourself?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, it's so cool." And I'm like, I can't like I can't. But there's different people and that like doing different things. I like to sit on my bike for 3 hours in a row, just pedaling along, which is I find it hard for myself to understand how that's enjoyable.
So I guess the takeaway is to find what you enjoy and just be doing that. And don't feel that you have to force yourself to do something.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a little bit the same. It's like Maarten said, like it's a bit similar to maybe going for a run or something where maybe you don't feel like starting, but then when you start, you enjoy it and you feel great after you get that reward. And I think that can be a motivator as well. Because I mentioned, like, don't do it if you don't feel like it, but it's a little bit like that with everything. In the morning you don't feel like waking up, but then when you wake up, you're happy that you're.
Well,
I'm not happy for a while after I wake up. Let me tell you,
that's a debatable one.
And it doesn't change. Like I have the same feeling in the morning. You're just like, you can tell yourself that you're gonna feel good in like an hour, but you don't believe it. You never believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. You kind of have to start something to know if you're gonna want to do it, and even then, it might take some time, right? So,
okay, so that's some brilliant answers there. So that brings us pretty much to the end of our time. So a big thank you to both our guests, Maarten and Samuel, and thank you to Kem and Luan again for helping me host.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it was a blast.
anytime.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I had fun.
Thanks so much, guys. So if you want to find out more about EXP, head over to the website and read some of the articles, or come join us on the Discord to join in with the community. Until next time, take care, everyone, and bye.
EXP music.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes?
Done. Excellent.